I'm
Unlike
doing
my deal.
I'm doing the neighbor's tree work next week, so, and we haven't discussed the bill yet. No idea what I said.
You haven't killed each other.
So, check out everything.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Town of Waukesha joint public hearing with the Town Board and the Plan Commission beginning at 6 o'clock, May 11th, 2017. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Bob Flanagan.
Present.
Al White.
Here.
Renee Ramirez. Here. Ken Miller.
Here.
Town Chairman. I'm sorry. Chairman Merrick.
Present.
Bob Stigler.
Here.
Brian Fisher.
Here.
Larry Wolf.
Here.
Mike Dorr.
Here.
And Jim Radke is absent.
And Madam Clerk, have you met the opens meeting law?
Yes, we have.
And we can begin with the public hearing. Notice is hereby given that a joint public hearing involving the Town of Waukesha Plan Commission and the Town of Waukesha Town Board will be held on Thursday, May 11th, 2017, beginning at 6 p.m. at the Waukesha Town Hall located at West 250 South 3567 Center Road, Waukesha, Wisconsin, to hear a proposed amendment to the conditional use for the Green Man Tree and Landscape Company located at West 240 South 6103 Highway 164. Tax key number is WAKT 132-998-003. All interested parties will be giving an opportunity to be heard. And we can open it up to public comments if there are any.
The petitioner should make their presentation again. We should, why don't you step up and introduce yourself, council? Just as an introduction for the Plan Commission and the board, they originally applied for a site plan, a plan of operation approval, but when we reviewed the totality of what they were proposing, the staff felt it best to hold the conditional use hearing. His conditional use specifically sets forth certain pieces of equipment, and they wanted to modify that, and so we didn't want any confusion. So I think that's fair to, we originally thought we could do it by site plan, a plan of operation, but we're here as the conditional use just to make sure if there were changes to the conditional use. So the document they submitted may not look like a normal conditional use application, but that's the reason why, and I think they can explain further what's going on.
I would say that is a fair summary. My name is Attorney Kevin Clark,
appearing with Dan Guston, owner of Green Man Tree and Landscape. While I should give you guys a little background here, in 2013, Green Man Tree was issued a conditional use permit to operate a landscaping business on his property. A conditional use permit issued by the town board did not include a requirement for any fencing. Now, I don't have that plan in front of you. I don't think it's very material for tonight. From 2013 to 2016, there was never any issues from the public about complaints of operating the business. Within the last year, there was a complaint by someone from the public, and the town decided to issue a zoning violation. Since then, Green Man Tree has worked with the town to come up with a plan to come in compliance with the town code and also allow him to operate his business under the original conditional use permit. That included a meeting on March 27th with town planner Jamie Rybchek, building inspector Martin Montoya, town chairman John Merrick, and attorney John Macy. From there, we came up with, well, the plan was up there. We came up with this site plan to basically, as I said, alleviate the complaints of anyone from the public, and also allow Mr. Guston to use his property and operate his business. So that's what we've submitted. Now, part of that application, it included a couple of amendments that were a couple of skid loaders that were extra, a couple of trucks. A few other pieces of equipment that weren't under the original conditional use permit. So that, I think, is why the town recommended that this go forward as an amendment to the conditional use permit. There also was an amendment to some of the hours of operation from the original conditional use permit. Again, I don't think those are the concern of the town. I think the major concern has been the screening and fencing of the property. And so the site plan that we had come up with includes, so to give you guys the way I look at this is that the business portion, I consider that the operating area. And so you have the operating area, and then the most eastern portion, that's Highway 164. So on the most eastern portion of the operating area, a new fence is going to be put in place, and that'll be a wood lattice fence. It'll be a 4-foot high fence, but under that will be 2-foot high cement blocks. So that'll be 6 feet high in total. That's going to go along the entire eastern border of the operating area. Also, in front of that, in compliance with the town code, Mr. Guston has already, I believe, put in some evergreen trees. And so that'll also be along the entire eastern border of the operating area. Moving on to the southernmost border. So if you got the northern arrow right there. Now the southernmost border, that would be perpendicular to Highway 164. He's also going to do the same thing with the wood lattice fence and the cement blocks, and also have the trees in front of the wood lattice fence to block any public right-of-way, any view from the public right-of-way. On the westernmost border, you have what is called the display area. That's going to be consist of 4 to 6 foot high cement blocks and be divided to allow for mulch and compost and and firewood. Those are products that are sold by Mr. Guston's company to the public, and appropriately are merchandise. So if you keep going along there, that area is going to close off that western border completely, because then you have the barn.
Counselor, we're going to give you a pointer so that you can
Oh, absolutely.
better point those out.
Well, they have it in front of them.
Yeah, I think if there's any questions, I can address those. Thank you very much. Okay, all right, I just had it work in a second. There it goes. Okay, and so then that leaves us with the barn enclosing these areas. And then you have another 90-foot cement block wall to enclose in basically the entire operating area. I should also note that on that northern side of the property, this property is so far set back that there's actually a natural screening. There's actually a mound. I don't know if you guys have to be familiar with Highway 164, but this whole side of the property is not visible from the public right away. It's just too far set back, and there's actually just a natural screening. So to wrap things up, we believe that we, as in Mr. Guston and myself and Green Man Tree and Landscape, believe this plan complies with the town ordinances, specifically addresses the concerns that have been noted by the town, and still allows Mr. Guston to operate his business. Quite frankly, this is a business that requires equipment to be moved around and material that needs to be moved. That's an essential part of his business. So I would ask that the Plan Commission, when voting on this, that they take that into account. Are there any questions for me or Mr. Guston?
Anybody from the Plan Commission or the board? Questions? Commissioner Miller.
No, it's just,
If you want to step up.
it's just 1-inch stone under the
Are they,
block.
are they regular cement block, like 16-inch type?
No. They're 2 foot by 6 foot.
Oh, they're, okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
On the lattice fence, would that be able to go rather than leaving a 2-foot gap to be covered with boulders? Is there a reason that couldn't go all the way down?
The lattice?
Yeah.
Yes, because there'll be dirt butting up to the block. If you take a look at the picture, there's large boulders
Right.
that go first. Then that will be filled in with dirt and mulch to block some of the view.
Supervisor Fisher.
One quick question, maybe you
Sure.
could illustrate up there, but the equipment that you've identified quite a number of pieces of equipment, is that, the thing even that Planner Rebarchek's summary of that with vehicles, 3 pickup trucks, 2 dump trucks, 1 bucket truck, 2 skid loaders, 2 tractors and 3 trailers, is that all intended to go in that area that was designated for equipment, or where does all of that go?
Yes, it is. And I actually cleaned out my barn for the first time in 2 years. But all the skid loaders actually fit in here the majority of the time. The tractors, the skid loaders, and the equipment. The pickup trucks are on the outside. They're parked here and in this area.
So the trailers, the dump trucks, everything goes in there? What I'm just trying to get a feeling for is, you got quite a few pieces of equipment. Is that sufficient amount of area to?
Yes,
to
more
load
than
all of that
enough.
in?
This is actually about 30 feet larger than we originally proposed 3 years ago. So I have parking here, parking here, and one of those pickups is my personal
Okay,
truck.
thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Planner Rybarczyk, comments?
No, I think before the Plan Commission and the board tonight is, from a policy standpoint, to review each of the areas that have been identified on the revised site plan and to determine first if it's a display area or is it a outdoor storage area. And per our ordinance, there are different requirements for each of those types of uses. And then once that has been identified for each of the areas, the second policy decision that the Town Plan Commission Board need to make is, are those areas screened accordingly to our ordinance? And then if so, you have the right tonight as part of the agenda item to approve either approve, deny, or table, if you need more information, the conditional use request. As the attorney had mentioned, the hours of operation, those have changed slightly from the original, but I don't think that they're out of the norm that we see for other businesses of this type. And then the second was they did modify the number and or types of equipment that they had from the first inception. So again, I don't think that that's as significant. I think from the zoning violation standpoint, it was just the appearance of the property. And what this drawing doesn't necessarily, I think, detail, and I can try to pull up Google Earth, is that I believe that the outside storage area today is much larger than what is being proposed now. So he is proposing to reduce that area and then also kind of, I think, better organize the site and screen it. So with that, those are the only comments that I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Planner Rybarczyk?
Jamie, what does our ordinance say? Does this cover the revised ordinance that we did for commercial and for businesses a few months ago? Are we covered under what that ordinance was changed to as far as fencing goes? Because remember, didn't we come up with the idea that we need to have commercial areas fenced in completely, and is this going to do that?
We just talked about it as part of our codification, but we haven't made any changes to our ordinance. So this is being reviewed under the language of the current ordinance. So I've copied that section and put it into the staff report. It's on page 2 of the staff report. So we have what's called exterior site usage. And exterior site usage is broken up into 2 categories: outside storage of materials and equipment, and then number 2 is outside display of merchandise. So as you look at the site plan, you need to identify each of the areas, and you have to determine whether it's outside storage of materials and equipment, or is it outside display of merchandise. Once you've categorized each of those areas, then you have to go back and look at each of those areas individually and see if it meets the requirement. So for example, if you identify one of the areas as outside storage of materials and equipment, you then have to ask yourself, is the storage area visible from any public right-of-way? Does the storage area, is it completely enclosed with a 6-foot high wooden fence or a chain link fence with evergreen plantings on the street side? And then it goes on. Is the storage area less than 20% of the lot area? And then are the stored items accessory to the approved business? And then same goes for outdoor storage, outside display. If you identify an area as outside display, as you can see, the requirements are not as restrictive. You don't necessarily have to have it screened from public view. So that's really what's before the Plan Commission and the board tonight. The staff looked at this very closely, very thoroughly. We felt that it was best for us to present the facts to you and then leave the actual determination of the areas, and if the applicant has addressed those areas sufficiently, up to the Plan Commission and the board.
Specifically, the commissioner might recall the staff came with a change to eliminate the fencing and putting it in simplistic terms, and that was not accepted by the commission. So it did not go forward. So you are correct, the recollection is correct, that these are the current laws, those were the laws you had in place at the time, the laws we had in place at the time we proposed the amendments, and the laws we have in place now. And that's why it's very important. They, have set forth that they think maybe that it inadvertently was referred to as storage when it's displayed. Okay, and so and there's two different rules for storage versus display. And that's why you have to make the policy decision, and you may have more questions as to what's there and why is it display. To put more simply, display doesn't have the same screening requirements as storage. That storage was the one with fence. Again, I'm putting it in simple terms. And that's why on their chart, they show it as display storage, if I stated that correctly, Council. And they'll go into detail why they think it should be categorized display. They did at our staff meetings versus storage. Okay, so it's very important that you understand, and it's laid out carefully in the staff report. It's laid out carefully tonight by your planner that first you decide if it's display or storage, and then you have to decide what they're proposed to screen it, because they're screening everything. It's just different screening for what it is. Does that make sense? So do we have your answer?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just got a suggestion to offer, and Attorney Mace just kind of went right where I was thinking. I mean, we need to make this policy decision. I guess I'd be interested in having the petitioner or his counsel or representative make the pitch to us, if you will. Start with the premise that it's outside storage and make the pitcher persuade us that it's display. I mean, I guess that's what I'd be interested in hearing. Is that appropriate or not? I guess I'll ask the chairman. I'd like to hear it from them.
Yes.
Well, we've spent the last year trying to determine what is the best terminology for that. And one of our questions, because we were already approved for the original site plan, and then it was brought to our attention that if the stuff is labeled as outdoor storage, we needed a fence. And if it's labeled as display, we don't need a fence. But obviously there are some other rules. So what we did after meeting with Jamie and John and Attorney Macy, we concluded that the best solution is to keep it as outdoor storage, and that's why we agreed to put the fence up. So all of this entire plan was put together with everyone's input over the course of the last year. So being outdoor storage and having the 6-foot fence in front of it with evergreens, we are in compliance.
Oh, okay, thank you. I guess my comment would be if the petitioner is basically not going to try to make an argument that it is display, that you can acknowledge it as storage. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you're basically saying,
Well, yes.
is that what you're saying?
If we were to label it as outdoors, as display, it opens up a whole different can of worms as far as rules and regulations and what meets the town's requirements. So we decided just keep it as outdoor storage, labeled as outdoor storage. We'll put the fence up in the evergreens and we should be compliant with everything.
Okay. And I guess the place I'm at, you've all spent a whole lot more time with this than some of us have. And you had a lot of discussions on them. And my first blush impression would be that it looks like storage to me. And I guess we're saying is if the petitioner is not going to try to make an argument to the contrary, I would think it's storage. Maybe that's overly simplistic, but that's the way I'd see it.
That's what we were originally approved for, is storage.
I have a question.
Please.
So the employee parking that you have now
Mhm.
and the employee parking that's just identified on your drawing, that's not going to change significantly, right? They're about the same, right? What you're using now for this parking area, for your parking area?
Well, originally, when we came up to the council, we really didn't decide exactly where the employee parking was going to be. I do have, because there was a previous business here, and they did have substantial parking here, but we decided to move the employee parking here.
Right.
And it's approximately 60 feet.
And you're using that for parking now, right?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
So that's not going to change substantially in size from what it is now to what you've displayed here.
No,
Okay.
no, not at all.
I'm going somewhere with this. So I just
Okay.
want to make sure that I'm understanding what's going on. So that is the southernmost border of the adjustments that you're making,
Correct.
right? But south of that, isn't there additional stuff? Isn't there piles of mulch and?
No, this is farm field. And then here, on the original proposal, we had an area here that was going to be, was labeled as future outdoor storage.
Okay.
And we decided to just keep everything in this area. Because when it,
How far does your property go south? Jamie, do you know that?
So up here is
Goes to-
Google Earth.
no, it's
Oh, there you go. Thank
way
you.
down here.
Yeah. What this shows, and it's hard to see with my cursor, but this is kind of where his employee parking is today. So the employee parking is here.
It goes from, this is where the berm was. My property goes all the way down to about here. It's probably another,
And your drawing displays everything from here north, right?
correct.
So my question is, what's going on with this? That's my question.
This stuff is going to be, there's a berm here that was going to be removed. It's just wood chips.
Okay,
Okay,
that's going away.
correct,
It's just gonna be flat land.
correct. And then to answer your question, my property is approximately 250 feet to the south of there.
I can-
Okay,
Thank you.
yep. Anyone else?
I guess the bottom line is regardless of if it's storage or display, as long, from my perspective at least, as long as it's completely screened from public right away,
Mhm.
I could get behind that and support it. But that's, I think that was the original problem, is lack of screening.
There wasn't any,
Right.
right? And just so the council knows, I didn't know that I needed any screening for the first 3 years. Because when we came up to the planning commission, it was never even discussed that I needed any type of fencing or screening.
And to the planner, wouldn't you describe the requirements for storage as more restrictive than for display? So if he is stipulating that it's all storage and the commission and the town board feels that he's meeting the storage ordinance, then that being more restrictive, if that's what they decide, there shouldn't be a problem, right?
And I believe if any of the commissioners or board members have been past the property, the east end of the operating area, I think it's safe to say you've done the improvements except for the boulders and
Fence.
the fence.
Correct.
But the trees you've put in, you've stabilized the trees with the ropes. The 4 to 6 foot cement blocks holding or identifying the areas have been put in.
That's correct.
It's just the lattice fence and the boulders with the landscape mulch that you're gonna put at the base
Correct.
is the last. So you should be able to get a sense now as to the screening that he's put in place, with the exception of the fencing that will then at the lower level below the canopy of the tree further screen the storage. I don't know if you haven't done that to the south because you have to remove the mulch and that and kind of bring the operation to the north to the new operating area that you've identified.
And it's been raining for 3 weeks.
Correct.
I don't want to have the same issue that we had for this gentleman the last time after all this work's been done. Please know that it says, Mr. Chairman in particular, because you said that, there's a line that says storage area should not be visible from the public right of way. I think we have to acknowledge that's probably next to impossible because of the topography.
It's next to impossible along most of 164 as the road is higher than.
And the trees are 25 feet tall that I put in.
And so, I mean, we have to very clearly, that's why the staff was saying if it's display, it's not necessarily as restrictive. That line is not in the display line. And now if they want to say it's all storage, that's fine. You have to,
Well,
I hear what they're saying, I hear,
John, during our meeting, you brought up some concerns about labeling it as display.
Well, we said the building inspector would have to determine whether or not there were any additional codes that would apply. And the worst, one of the worst for display might be since people could come onto the site, would the county then require him to change his whole access? I mean, it could open a huge,
But I have
legal phrasing to call it display, but we don't make those, there'd be a lot of things out of the plan commission and the town board's hands if it were deemed to be a display, because the county could step in, the county or state, the building inspector could step in, ADA bathrooms, that kind of stuff. So you are absolutely right. I said display could raise those issues, but we weren't going to go there with the building inspector or with the state of the county.
Well, Martin actually suggested labeling it as display in June. We all had a meeting together and looked at my property, and Martin suggested labeling it as display.
We who? You, Martin?
You, me, Jamie, and Martin.
Did I miss that meeting? Did I miss something?
No, you were
I
there.
think what Building Inspector Martin Montoya was saying is that if he could label it as display, it would be less restrictive.
Less restrictive with regards to screening. However,
Correct.
you'd run into issues with ADA bathroom, could run into other issues.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't particularly want the public on your site other than by appointment for a unique reason, as I understand your business operation that's not designed. You don't want the liability or the issues of having a lot of public on your site. And
Correct.
Once in a while, they might come to see a log, or they might come to see a rock or something, but it's not.
What I want is to be done with this so I can run my business.
So you're getting the sense of why this is important, storage versus display, the regulations for each, and I don't think there's an easy answer. We just have to make sure you fully understand what the options are. So
That's why this has taken a year, is really deciding what the difference is between display and storage. Because they're totally different rules and regulations.
I mean, I think the common sense argument even on this is that it is storage. I mean, if this really is not for the public to be there other than in unusual or exceptional
right.
circumstances. I mean, I'm sitting there trying to run my head through how many places do you really have merchandise or merchandising that the public isn't onto the premises or what or not. I'm sure there's examples of that, but I think that's kind of nonsensical. I mean, I think it's storage, and if you consented to that or accept to it, I mean, I think that issue is answered there, and we simply have to make sure it meets the requirements for storage. That's where I think we're at.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
well, it just sounds to me like he's done everything that we've asked him to do. And he's calling it storage. If Jamie agrees, I don't see why we aren't approving it. I mean, we can talk it to death, but if we call it storage, it's storage.
We're not approving it yet.
No, but I would make
Right.
that motion unless we're not through talking about it.
After a public hearing, yes.
Yeah.
The whole reason that we haven't moved forward with anything is because this issue is storage or display. And that's what we're trying, that's what the policy decision is between the planning commission and the board, because they're two very distinct requirements for each one.
I know what you're saying.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I agree would be more mainly, my opinion would be, this looks like to be more of a storage issue than a display issue, and I'm recommending or that I would go with the proposal that we have in front of us. And I think he did a great job doing his homework and all the time that he spent doing what he has done and presented what he's doing here.
Thank you.
Bit of an ambiguity. It says storage and display on the one firewood.
And that's, I think that's what we're trying to determine, correct? Are you
Correct.
storage
And
or are you display?
you can call it storage. It's screened. So,
Well, their original, to answer the commissioner's question, yes, you have the submittal. The submittal names them both. You're now narrowing it down to what you believe it really is. And, you know, they have presented more that, I think when they submitted it, they were still working on all the details of the fencing and the blocks and getting everything in place. And now, if I'm hearing it correctly, as two of the members have already indicated, they're saying, analyze it as if it's storage. We don't want the display issues or the potential display issues. Let's all just stipulate it's storage, now make a determination, read over what we have to do for storage, look at our plan, and make a decision of whether we satisfy the code for storage. So let's get beyond the storage. Counselor, you agree?
I agree.
And now let's look at the code. Carefully, everybody look at the code and their plan, and we need to decide whether you feel it meets the code. Damon, do you have anything further you want to say now that it's deemed storage? You want to walk us through the code sections and why and what they've done to try to address and meet it?
Sure. So I think the best is on page 2 of the staff report. It shows the exterior site usage. Item 1, outside storage of materials and equipment. And it says in all non-residential districts and non-residential uses, outside storage of materials and equipment may be permitted subject to the following. Letter A is storage area is allowed in the rear yard only as determined by the Plan Commission. The side yard could be used if the Plan Commission determines rear yard is not practical location with screening of the side yard. Item B is that the storage area shall not be visible from any public right-of-way. Item C is that the storage area shall be enclosed with a 6-foot-high wooden fence or a chain link fence with evergreen plantings on the street side at the height of the fence at planting to screen, break up the view of the fence from the public. D is the storage area shall not exceed 20% of the lot area. And E, stored items shall be accessory to the approved business operation. I'll go back in 1A, staff had determined that 164 is the front yard. The north property line is the side yard. The south property line is side yard. The west, west property line would be the rear. Storage area should not be visible from any public right-of-way. They have proposed a series of treatments to screen it from 164, and then they've screened it also from the south, or will be screening it from the south, which would be Town Line Road. Storage area shall be enclosed with a 6-foot-high fence. They're again proposing the concrete block, the 6-foot in height lattice fence with the boulders that would be at the base with the 2 feet, and then the trees that are in front of it. The storage area shall not exceed 20% of the lot area. He has, I believe it's 7 acres. So he has not reached that threshold. Yes, he's at 7.22 acres. And then item E is that the stored item shall be accessory to the approved business operation. It's the storage of the compost, the firewood, and the mulch, which are part of the Green Man tree and landscaping business. So that is my general overview of that section of the ordinance.
Questions for the planner?
So one of the questions might be, item B, storage area shall not be visible from any public right of way. Because it'll be likely that this storage area will still be visible from the public right of way.
I think to Attorney Macy's credit that, yes, that condition of our ordinance, it may be in some instances impossible to completely screen it from the public right of way. So yes, that would be a policy decision.
Just trying to get it out there.
So as part of any motion, all we could say is they've met the intent of the ordinance. I mean, seriously, I mean, to cut to the quick, if you feel that everything they've done has satisfied the intent of the ordinance, and we would know that when people call and say, well, I can still see it from the road, we'd say, well, the plan commission has made a determination. This is not dissimilar, as the planner liked to remind me, when you had to make a similar finding that the intent of the ordinance was with the material of the couple of the buildings that have been built recently. We have very specific codes, and then the plan commission had to make a determination that it met the intent. And that's the best I can do.
And I would like to just make one note. When this plan was originally passed by the Plan Commission and Town Board in 2013, no fence was ever required. So I think Mr. Guston has made some significant efforts to screen his property and operate his business with what the town is requesting.
Question, Mr. Chairman, if I might have the petitioner representative, but in terms of screening part of it, I mean, the drawing that you presented, they're referring to those as evergreen trees and plantings and stuff. Can you give us just a little bit of a sense of species, spacing, size, whatever, that type of thing? I mean, certainly that's got the potential to be a screening component. Give us a sense of what that is.
The spruce trees they're blue and green spruce, and they're approximately 25 feet tall. So, I mean, there's really not much you can see.
Okay, and just a
Of the
sense, because
equipment.
I have not driven by the sense of spacing or anything or whatnot, just in general.
Probably 15 feet
Okay,
center to center.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Then at this time, we can close the public hearing and move on to the plan commission. It would be appropriate for board members to leave the podium, and it is 6:40. And we can continue on with the plan commission meeting beginning at 6:41 PM. And we'll move on with approval of the minutes from March 9th, 2017 is our motion.
So move.
In a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to 7, discussion and possible action. A, the amendment onto the conditional use. Petitioners Dan and Julia Guston. Company is the Green Man Tree and Landscape. Location is West 240, South 6103, Highway 164. Tax key number is WAKT 132998003. And this is for a recommendation to the town board. Is there a motion?
I move we approve subject to the conditions.
In a second. Any discussion?
Just a
Planner
Yeah,
Riker?
go ahead, Jane.
Go ahead, Supervisor Fisher.
Just for a point of clarification, condition number 2, staff left it blank. Am I correct in saying that we have determined this to be outdoor storage?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Only other thing is I think, and I will certainly support the motion, but I think it would be worth maybe just Jamie, you're double checking, running through that staff recommendation. I mean, this also includes establishing hours of operation and that type of thing. I mean, can you just summarize that quickly? I'm assuming that the motion then would include those conditions or staff recommendations, but I think you ought to bring those to light.
That is correct. So condition number 3, on page 3 of the staff report says the conditional use shall reflect the hours of operation as Monday to Saturday, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., and then 24 hours a day during freezing rain and snow events. And then condition number 4, the conditional use shall reflect the total number of vehicles, tractors, and trailers as A is 3 pickup trucks, B is 2 dump trucks, C is 1 bucket truck, D is 2 skid loaders, E is 2 tractors, and F is 3 trailers.
Just
Now, as part of the motion, have we included that you find that they've met the intent of screening? And I would also recommend that they be asked to submit for the planner and to the planner's satisfaction, a modified site plan that shows it as storage and give the detail of the trees that they represented. Basically represent what they said tonight, the detail they included. So we don't have this document in the file that says storage display. We'll have a document that says storage. We'll have the additional detail they've included, and that way the file will be complete. And I don't know, Jamie, if you'd included that, but I think based on what we heard at the public hearing, that we should include that, because you are still approving the CU and the site plan of operation as part of this recommendation. I know you did that last time, and I don't have a problem with
It's
that.
condition 5.
So if the maker of the motion, the second, have no objection to those 2 modifications, I would ask that Jamie include that. No objection.
Thank you. Anything further? We got a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to B, site plan and plan of operation. The petitioner is Waukesha County Park and Land Use. Location is 1927 East Sunset Drive, which is Manuka Park. Tax key is WAKT 134-5978. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Rybarczyk.
Before you tonight is, pulling up my staff report real quick. Waukesha County, they wish to replace a restroom facility at Picnic Area 3 with a new restroom and shelter building. The new building will accommodate group rentals up to 200 persons and serve the adjacent play fields. The parking lot will remain unchanged except for the addition of new handicap parking striping and an accessible concrete sidewalk to the building. Sanitary mound system to the northwest of the building is proposed. A number of trees will be removed to accommodate the proposed improvements. The use that's being proposed is a permitted use within the P1, which is the Park, Recreation, and Public District. Looking at the site plan, again, it's a proposed restroom shelter building, sidewalk and patio area, roughly 6,000 square feet of impervious surface to the site. The submitted application does not show any stormwater management. Plan of operation, again, it's for picnic group rentals and also supplement use by the adjacent playfield users. Hours of operation for the park are sunrise to 10 p.m. Every day. Parking, again, the parking lot there is for roughly about 100 spaces. So we don't necessarily have anything specifically in our code that talks about park shelters, but we believe that there's ample parking there. The architecture, you have the architectural drawings there. It's a very nice, nicely done building. So it meets our architectural requirements. As far as landscaping, as we all know in our site plan of operation ordinance, we have a kind of a matrix that asks for landscaping. It's kind of it's a point system. This is being set within an existing park, so we didn't necessarily know if the landscaping applied in this regard, but that would be a determination that would need to be made by the plan commission. As far as exterior lighting, it included, there wasn't didn't show any site lighting, but there's wall-mounted exterior lights are shown on the architectural drawings, so it appears that there will be some lighting on the building itself. So with that, we did put together a recommendation if the Plan Commission so chooses to move forward for approval to the board, and it was subject to 6 conditions. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the Plan Commission.
Thank you. Do we have a representative from Waukesha County here tonight?
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Jason Wilkie. I'm a senior landscape architect for the Parks Division for Waukesha County and project manager for this project. I did a very thorough overview, so maybe I'll just hit on the items that he brought up for discussion that you guys might be wondering about yet. The purpose of there was question of the architecture. There will be the roll down clear see-through walls for the open air pavilion portion, so that we can have it during inclement weather. You could protect a side or two from wind or rain, and then also be able to rent it into the winter, fall, spring, extend the revenue potential and use of the building for that space to be totally enclosed and kept out of the elements a little bit longer in the year. Another item was the landscaping. We don't typically do landscape plans for our buildings within the parks, such as shelters, other bigger buildings and offices we might, but the shelters we kind of leave really simple, minimize the labor to do landscape maintenance, because we really shift that focus to the natural management around in the park. And sometimes, like in the picture you have in your graphic, there is an example of another restroom building without a shelter that's in the park, where we had some rain gardens for some runoff, infiltration, and we have prairie sod that we planted, and it grew up really nice with native plants. So more of a natural effect on the the perimeters of our sites, rather than shrubbing up around the base of our buildings and having to maintain that stuff more actively. So we would like to, I hope you can see that as our landscape work that we do in the parks as an alternative to a landscape plan. Another thing was you brought up stormwater management. We did evaluate the stormwater. We always look at that. We do care about, we're making sure we don't have runoff that's affecting neighboring properties. And in this situation, the runoff kind of goes towards and next to the parking lot. It doesn't go off site to the residents that are to the, I think, east. It will not affect any off-site residents. And it has area to infiltration in the grass. And we also then evaluated, we usually follow our county stormwater ordinance, which would only require us if we had a half acre or more to do a permanent stormwater. We will, of course, during construction do erosion control protection, so we don't have disturbance that way, but stormwater control after is not required from the county ordinance either with this small area that's being affected. So we are not planning to do that, which we typically don't in our parks either, because there's lots of areas for the stormwater to infiltrate and run off in the natural landscape. I think those are the items that kind of were left to for you guys to wonder if they follow or don't fit into your requirements. And I hope those explanations kind of help out. If you have any other questions specifically, go ahead.
Any other questions for Mr. Wilkie? Supervisor Fisher?
Yeah, the only question I've got is just for clarification purposes. I mean, this is a small building in a big park. In the plan of operation, we're addressing hours of operation and everything. That then, I guess, assuming what you're asking for, that's construed to apply to the entirety of the park then, is it?
Yeah, our entire park, the park itself has those hours. Sunrise, I think, till 10 or something. That's usually when our rentals would have to end to and leave.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
In a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. I see you are celebrating 175 years this year for being established in 1842. It's good to celebrate those milestones. So thank you very much.
On to C, accessory building. The petitioner is Mark Heinert. Location is South 40 West 22690 Summers Hills Drive. Tax key number is WAKT 13909999008. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Ray Barczyk.
The petitioner is wanting to construct an approximate 40-foot by 50-foot accessory building on the subject property. The height is 25 feet as measured from the grade to the peak. The exterior appearance of the accessory building will be compatible with the principal residence as far as siding, trim, and then the roof will match that of the principal residence. The accessory building will be used for the storage of recreational vehicles and personal items on the subject property. Anytime an accessory building is over 600 square feet or exceeds the maximum height requirement within the zoning district, it requires plan commission and board approval. With regard to the review of the accessory building, you can't construct an accessory building in the front yard or any closer than the principal building. This is actually within the rear yard of the subject property. If you all remember, about a year ago, Mark was actually before us. His building was actually in the front yard, and at that time, it did not get approval, so he has come back with a new application where it's in the rear yard, so he meets that provision. He does meet the total aggregate square footage for accessory structures. He also meets the number of accessory structures. We limit it to 3. There is an existing garden shed that's on the property, so with this new structure, he would have a total of 2. And then he also meets the front yard, side, and rear yard setbacks within the RE single-family residence estate district. With regard to the height in the RE district, it's a maximum of 15 height from grade to peak, unless you use one of the 2 height provisions. He is going a total of 25 feet in height, but he is matching the roof pitch and the compatibility of the accessory building with the principal residence in order to get the additional height. The other reason for the additional height is for the overhead door for the recreational vehicles. That's why it's a little bit higher than we've typically maybe seen in the past. So with that, I did put together a recommendation for approval. And I do believe he was working on a grading plan to share with the town engineer. And I don't remember if Chris had reviewed that or not, but it is condition number 6 of my staff report that prior to the issuance of the zoning and building permit that the town engineer signs off on a grading plan. So with that, I will turn it back over to the Plan Commission and Board for any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Heinert with us tonight? Good evening.
Good evening. So I think Jamie's kind of summed it up pretty well. It's just a storage building in the back. It's going to be on a grade because of where we worked. We worked with the architectural committee that's part of the subdivision, which I didn't know about when I bought the property, nor was it on the title. So it's been a long battle trying to work this out. So I worked with them, got them to take a look, and we came up with the attached plan after many drafts. And so it's going to be a little bit on a grade that we're trying to figure that out yet. Probably going to require some kind of foundation, full foundation on the backside. So I'm still trying to work through those details, trying to keep the costs within a reasonable range to make this thing make sense. So it matches the house pretty much to a T. It'd be hardy plank board. The house is cedar, so it'd be very similar. All elements of the windows would be the same as the house. Garage doors would match. It's pretty much a cookie cutter of the house.
Any questions for the petitioner and/or Planner Ray Barczyk?
Just a quick one of the petitioner, and I think you basically answered it, but I did see on the drawings a conditionally approved stamp there by Dale Colbeck. So he was acting on behalf of the
neighborhood
Architectural Control Board.
Yeah,
then,
because the permits, there's some kind of regulation in the original thing where if there's not 88% of the permits, it still is in the hands of the original developer. which is Dale and I don't remember the other gentleman's name, but I worked with both of those guys. They've been over, worked with them, tried to come up with a plan. They've obviously sent me back to the drawing board a number of times, and this is what we kind of came up with.
Okay.
So,
Thank you very much.
yeah. And as far as height, just to address that too, I think Jamie hit it. My trailer's 13 feet tall, so it's a 14-foot door. And with the 812 pitch, if you do the architectural on that, that's why it ends up getting as tall as it does. But obviously not ideal by me either, but in order to match the peak, that's what it ends up being. So.
Any other questions?
I will move to recommend approval to the town board.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And on to D, accessory building for Clint Albert. Location is South 29 West 27340 Green Lane. Tax key number is WAKT 1324990. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Roy Barczyk.
So before you tonight, the petitioner is wanting to construct a 30-foot by 30-foot accessory building in the property. The height is 15 feet as measured from grade to peak. The petitioner has stated that the exterior color of the accessory building will match that of the principal residence. However, the material of the accessory building is steel and the principal residence is cedar. The accessory building will be used for the storage of cars and personal items on the subject property. As I had mentioned, anytime the accessory building is over 600 square feet or exceeds the maximum height requirement per the zoning district, it requires plan commission and board approval. In going through the requirements of the code, it is located in the rear of the property, so the petitioner is in compliant with point 1. In point 2, the petitioner is within the tolerance for the total aggregate square or total aggregate floor area for the site. In point 3, the petitioner does have 2 existing sheds on the property. This accessory building would be the third one. Our ordinance does allow up to 3 accessory structures, so the petitioner is in compliance with this provision. With regard to compatibility, I point this out for the Plan Commission and the board. The property is zone R1 single family residence. In the planner appointment, I did make mention to the applicant that the Plan Commission and board does look at compatibility. In this case, the residence is, and I have to go back to my, is a cedar horizontal sided house. What the applicant has chosen is a steel vertical accessory building. So I believe it's up to the Plan Commission and board tonight to determine whether what the type of structure that the applicant has picked, if they feel that that's compatible for the property and the surrounding area. There is an adjoining neighbor to the east, which is in close proximity to where the accessory structure is going to be located. As far as the front yard setback and side yard setback, the petitioner is in compliance with that, and then the petitioner is also in compliance with the height provision. So subject to the Plan Commission making the determination on the compatibility, I did put together a recommendation for approval if the Plan Commission so choose to move forward, subject to the 8 standard conditions. So with that, I will turn it back over to the Plan Commission.
Thank you, Planner Roy Barczyk.
It's a good point that you bring up. What the neighbor's house, what is the exterior finish on the neighbor's house?
Planet stone. Planet stone.
You must be Mr. Albert.
Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening. And he's also, the neighbor also has a wood garage that has horizontal siding on it, which would be the same as my structure. And it's not cedar on the house. It's vinyl siding. It's like a fake cedar. And the colors match exactly.
Yeah, that's my next question. Also, I have a question. You have temporary shed, then do you propose to tear those other 2
I mean, they're basically a shed and a box is what they are, and they will get taken down because I just mentioned them as a temporary shed because there's no foundation. They're just on dirt. It's basically just a tent. If I wanted to pull the stakes out, you could move it over, but yeah, them are going to get moved in time. But the problem is we have 4 kids and their stuff just overwhelms us, to be real honest. So storage is definitely needed.
Planner Ray Barczyk, what does our code say specifically to materials on accessory buildings?
It's on page 2 of my staff report, item number 4. So it says, per section 13-210D6 of the Town of Waukesha Code of Ordinances, the accessory building shall be compatible with the principal structure. The Town Plan Commission and/or Town Board may require specific elements of the accessory structure to be compatible with the principal structure, which may include building materials, material colors, roof pitch, windows, building massing, and scale.
And if I can add, it's not visible from the road. If you're driving to the east, my house is in front of it, you're not going to see it. And if you're driving to the west, there's probably a 6-foot pitch up there, and I have pine trees along the east side of my property. So if anything, you'd see the top 4 foot of the roof, if anything.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I would make one comment. It's kind of, and I didn't go by and view the property. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. But it's kind of tough to make a call on that. Do we have any photographs or anything of the existing residence?
I don't have any photographs of the residents. I just have the aerial. I can try to pull it up in Google Earth and see if we can see it from Google Earth.
It's wood and it's detached.
Let's take me to the right. Is this it right here?
That would be his garage right there. Yep. That's a neighbor's garage. That's his house. And then the lot line is right here. As you can see, all these big trees, that barrier at the garage structure would be 6 feet set from the asphalt, which would be approximately right here. So when driving down the road, definitely not visible from this way, and driving down the road, you would just see the top of it.
So this is your driveway?
Well, it's a little burly there. It's a little cleaner than that, but yeah.
See if we can see.
See, because that would be the view come and see the mature pine trees. I mean, you'd see just probably end the 15 feet approximately would be here, because that's probably a good 6 feet from here down to my driveway. Like I said, I guesstimate that tree to be 40 feet. And I have added colonial windows to the garage door for aesthetics. So when you do actually look down the driveway, to add a little more curb appeal to it.
Well, let's take a look at the requirements of 13.210, or not the requirements, this is the town board and plan commission may require specific elements. First one is building materials. Like, I think steel versus what's on your principal structure right now, we can determine that that's not compatible. Material colors, we know that they are because you told us that they're going to match exactly. What about roof pitch of the accessory building compared to your home?
It's a 512, same pitch.
Same pitch. And I didn't see, other than in the garage.
Mr. Chairman,
You've got,
I don't want to interrupt it, but you just said 512. Now the plan says 412.
Oh, 412, I'm
I'm-
sorry,
I just wanted
412. Yeah, I'm sorry, my
make it
mistake. Yep,
clarified.
yep.
Okay. And can I revisit, what do you have on your house again for siding? Can we revisit?
It's vinyl siding,
It's
but it's like
vinyl.
a fake cedar look is what.
Okay, but it's vinyl.
Yeah, it's vinyl. Could you zoom on the house a bit or not necessarily?
windows, I see you've got several windows in the garage door and then one on the structure itself. Is that correct?
Correct. One window facing the west. Yeah, it's too muffled.
Yeah, it's not gonna get it.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner Miller.
No. No, he does not object.
He doesn't, and I think the reason that he put temporary on the drawing is that he meant that they don't have an actual foundation to them. They're portable. But I believe in our planner appointments, you didn't necessarily at that time intend to take them down.
No, I just worded them as temporary because really, and it's a fine line definition, but really they're just tents. They're just canvas. I mean, a windstorm could rip them and it would be, it's not a sufficient building to keep your stuff out of the elements. It's very remedial.
Quick question, maybe it answered it, but overly simplistic. Why wouldn't you want to try to match the exterior building materials?
Basically just cost. I had priced to get a 3-car garage of the same structure and it was 3 times the price. So it's just basically cost 100%. So
three times the price?
Correct. Yes.
A matching vinyl siding?
Yes, for a 30 by 30 structure.
Hard to believe.
That's so have 2 quotes. They wanted 52,000 for the 3-car garage, 30 by 30. I guess with concrete, this is going to be 14,000 just for the structure, and then the concrete is going to be probably about 4,000 to 5,000. Yep. And I plan on doing landscaping on the side to make it look more garage. It's because it was a concern of my wife, is it going to look like an eyesore? But we added the extra doors on there. And the colors match, so I think it's going to look more of a garage as opposed to a pool building.
Mr. Chairman, I got one more question. Thank you. I know also it says you match the roof as steel. Do you have steel on your home also?
No.
No. What do you have in your home?
Shingles.
What kind? Just asphalt?
Yeah, asphalt.
I
The
think
color
what
matches.
What his purpose was that he's matching the color, not the materials, just the color.
Understand.
Mr. Chairman. I haven't got a problem with putting a building up. I think that's fine. I just got a problem with, for taking a precedence here in the past. We've always had matching materials and everything, and now we're going in the opposite direction if we can prove this. And I understand the cost problem here, and I'd like to build it for 52,000 myself,
I mean, even to face it though is the issue. You can't really just slap vinyl siding on a steel
Well,
structure.
I'm not saying you have to do that. That's not my point. But my point is every other building I think we've had in the past for accessory buildings like this, we've made people put on vinyl siding, cedar siding to match the house for the aesthetic part of it. And I got no problem with you putting a building up there. I think that part of it's fine, but I really got an issue with the material and
And I guess my defense would be that it's not visible from the road.
I understand what you're saying, but trees do get cut down over years, and some down the road someday, somebody may have a different idea as to the landscaping of the property, and you're still gonna have different neighbors someday, and they all gotta face that, I guess, and that's, if we're gonna be consistent about things, I think we gotta stay consistent and not change rules.
Can you use the microphone, Commissioner Flanagan?
Okay. You said that this 30 by 30, is it 30 by 30 building
Yes.
is going to cost how much?
Just for the building,
Yeah.
14,000.
Oh, no, wait, I'm talking about, let's assume for a minute, you said you had a bid from somebody that would have built it, stick built on the site.
Correct, for 52,000. Classic Builders, and then there was one other builder that came in at like 48,000. It was Badger Carpentry, I believe.
I should get back into the garage building business then.
I mean, the difference is the concrete. That doesn't include concrete, but 30 by 30, that's 900 square feet of concrete. It's going to be $4,000 top. So 13 and 4 is 17. That's still sufficiently under 52,000.
That you can't put vinyl siding on a pole barn? Is that what you're saying?
No, not at all.
What is the argument then for not using vinyl siding?
I just don't feel it's needed per se.
I see. Because you could put plywood over the.
Yeah, you could face it and put plywood, but then you deal with wrapping it, as opposed to what I'm paying the guys to construct. You're going to have to rewrap all the garage doors. Everything's going to be a 1/4 inch off. You're going to do all the trim, so it kind of defeats the purpose of what they're constructing. Then it's going to leave it unfinished. I mean, yes, you could face it with plywood, but it's just a lot of rewrapping.
I think also what's part of this is that this is one of WIC's packaged buildings. If he modifies and goes from vertical siding to horizontal siding, it changes the package because it also changes the interior steel structure and where the seams are at and what the panels are. So I think what he did is he did his cost analysis as to taking WIC's package, which you see on the screen, he got a price, versus going to a general wood stick built, which we've seen in other areas. And I think that he's probably right that the cost is 3 to 4 times. So for us to say, can you just turn it from vertical siding to horizontal siding? It's not that simple because it changes the package of what WIC proposed to him.
And also, I'd like to mention next door to the other neighbor has a WIC building that's steel on the back of his lot. If we could pull Google Earth back up, I don't know if that matters at all. But if you keep going to the east, we'd have to go. Oh, you can't see it with it. No, back. Yeah, I guess it's buried. Yeah, you can't see it. It would be right. Oh, there it is. That's a steel building. I know that's on the back end of his lot, but it's the same thing. That's a steel WIC constructed building.
I don't know when that was built in relationship to our ordinances.
What's Albert's contracting? My company. Landscaping.
Other questions for the petitioner or planner, Rybarczyk? Is there a motion? In a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I do. Yeah. Of all the ones that I've passed, since I've been sitting here, we have never had a situation that wasn't compatible. So you all know I'm not in favor of this.
And when you say compatible materials, compatible
Correct.
colors, thank you.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to clarify.
As the roof and the siding itself to be exact.
Thank you. Commissioner Flanagan?
My reason I generally agree with Al, but because the neighbor, his garage doesn't match his house. So I guess we're not really disrupting anything.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Aye. Motion does not carry. I would get back in touch with the planner and talk with them about what the plan commission and potentially board are gonna request for like materials between the house and accessory building.
I mean, what are they requesting? Just to face the side, the front of it? I mean, the sides don't necessarily need to be faced, or you want the whole thing faced?
Typically, yes, it's like materials.
All right.
All right.
Are we sending this to the town board without a recommendation?
Well, the recommendation is to deny from the plan commission.
No, the motion to approve was to be passed. You don't have a
Fair
motion to deny that's passed. I mean, I just want to tell you, I mean, you can't read in that, you have no motion.
Fair enough. So we can send it to the board with no motion.
You can send it to the board with the history that we have.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
I got Mr. White. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. And let's take a 5-minute break if we could. I have 7:19.
Sorry.